All right. So, good morning on this rainy, dreary, cold morning. It stays like today when I am thankful for virtual events. So, we're not having to travel in the rain. Um, I also feel the need to start off. If you can see me, I don't normally come to work in camo shirts. Not my normal look, but it's Spirit Week. So that's what we have going on here. Hopefully, some of your kids decided to participate today as well. I'm also excited for Friday, which is sports day, so I can wear my Gamecock jersey because, go Gamecocks. Um, Thank you for joining us today. I have started the recording, and so we are going to record just the initial presentation portion of today. But as most of you know, towards the end, I do stop the recording so that during the Q&A section, if you do want to unmute and ask questions without worrying about being in the recording, you can definitely do that. If you're anything like me and you need to kind of jot down or get your question out there right when it pops to your mind or else you'll forget, please drop it into the chat. I will be monitoring that throughout the presentation and can share that question for you as well. Otherwise, we have Samantha Martinez with us this morning. This is the second presentation she's done. So we do these community collaboration series every year, and she did one for us last year, and it was overwhelmingly helpful. Lots of really great actionable takeaways. So I was very excited when she agreed to present again. And with that being said, I will hand it over to you, Samantha.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure. Thanks. I see Julie's thumbs up, so I'll trust Julie for everybody else. She'll be our speaker for today. Thanks so much for letting me be here and talking with you all. And for those that are joining on camera, I appreciate it. It always helps to kind of see some visual feedback as you're presenting on something virtual. So I thank you for that. I'm really excited to kind of talk about friendship and self-esteem and just kind of what does that look like and how can we support your child's development. And I just want to start that you're already supporting them because you're here today, right? You're asking these questions and you're aiming to figure out ways to kind of help their growth. So congrats to all of you for doing that and taking the step. I want to make sure that as I'm clicking through, can you all see the next page? Perfect. So what we're going to talk about is like navigating friendships, kind of just the general importance of social development. We're going to talk a little bit about self-esteem. What are these aspects? What are we kind of considering? And then really the conversation is around like, how do these two interact? How do they play off of one another? And then my hope, and most importantly, is that you leave here after this presentation and feel like there's one thing that you can take and do at home today, right? So if your child's having difficulty kind of with social engagement and interactions, you can leave here and say, oh, I can do that. That makes sense. Or I've tried this already. Let me try the next thing. Who am I? Why do I get to come and talk to you about this? Well, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist at Southeast Psych and did my residency at the University of Miami. And I'm also a fellow Gamecock. So I would be in a Gamecock jersey on Friday for Spirit Week as well. And I'd say largely in my therapeutic setting, who I'm seeing or within my practice, I do a lot of testing for individuals with learning challenges, whether it's ADHD or autism or kind of just learning disabilities in general. And then within my therapy practice, I work a lot with individuals ages, 8 and up primarily, and all throughout kind of their age group. Why does that matter in terms of friendship and self-esteem? Largely who I'm working with are individuals who are feeling stuck in interpersonal relationships, right? So if you're a child who has a learning challenge, there's often those interpersonal dynamics come up and that becomes difficult. And how do I connect? And then what also within the context of therapy, right? I'm often talking with middle schoolers, navigating social friendships online and in person and what that might look like. And so within the clinical practice, I probably talk about social skill development and implementation every single day. And so, but I think more importantly than just being a clinician who's providing those clinical services to help with friendship and self-esteem, I'm also a friend. So I also kind of have friendships and develop friendships. And you might be wondering, why are you staring at this very vibrant flip-flop lunchbox today? But the reason I show you this is because I'd like to tell you before we kind of jump into these skills, a little bit a story about my own friendship. and I think it might be relevant and helpful. So, I have a best friend. We have been best friends since we were 6 years old. We are a 24-year friendship. And we became friends early on in elementary school. And recently she got engaged. And after becoming engaged, she wrote us all these really long letters about our friendship, asking us to be bridesmaids in her wedding. And at the end of my letter, she wrote, P.S. Thank goodness for the flip flop lunchbox. I had no idea what that meant. My clinical psychologist brain went like, "Is this a metaphor? Are we kind of connecting to something? Am I a flip flop? Are you a flip flop? Are we together?" I didn't know where we were going with this. So when we finally got a chance after all the celebrations of kind of being engaged and being in her wedding, I said, "I loved the letter. It was awesome. What does this flip flop lunchbox mean?" And she kind of laughed because it was clear to her what it meant, right? But the fact that I had no idea was kind of, I think, shocking to her. And she started telling me about the first kind of day and month that she transferred to our school. So she didn't go to kindergarten where I went to kindergarten, and she came in that first grade year. And she describes the first kind of few weeks of school being really lonely for her. She really didn't know who to talk to or who to connect with. And every single day she was going home and talking to her mom about, "I haven't met anyone at school. I don't know anybody." And mom's asking, "How's it going?" And she's like, "I don't know." She was kind of a quiet kiddo anyway. She wasn't somebody that was going to reach out and, introduce herself easily. So after a couple weeks of just sitting on her own at lunch and in classes, her mom finally said, "Okay, is there anyone that looks like someone you want to talk to?" And she started talking to her mom about this lunch table that had all these really cool lunch boxes, and they all kind of sat together and they seemed like they were having fun. So over the next week, her and her mom sat together and talked about a plan on how she could go over and talk to the cool lunchbox table. And they practiced what she was going to say, how she was going to say it, who she was going to talk to, until finally she got to the end of the week where they had practiced every single day. And she went up to the table and she said, "Hey, I really like your flip flop lunchbox. Can I sit with you?" And unbeknownst to me, and as she's telling me this story, I'm realizing, oh my goodness, I was the kid with the flip flop lunchbox. I forgot about the flip flop lunchbox that, we went to Staples and picked up, probably before the school year. And what I loved so much about that story is that what it highlighted is the effort that her mom and she like went through to make that interaction happen, right? It doesn't always happen so easily. Just go make a friend, just go talk to them, right? And especially for a kiddo who has some, I mean, she was more quiet and shy, or kiddos who are, their social interactions are more challenging. What happened in that moment is they practiced and they prepared, and she felt confident to be able to come and interact. Um, and be able to, like, come up and ask about the flip-flops. And I see a comment, "Kudos to her sweet mom." Absolutely. And I think that's why all of you are here too, right? It's like, how can we as parents help our child have this moment, right? Similar to this, where they're working together and being able to make that connection. I'm very grateful for her mom because she gave me a friend for life, right? And we were able to have that moment. So some of you might be thinking like, "Great, awesome, you had this cool story, but what does this mean for my child? How do I help them get their lunchbox moment?" And that's why we're here, right? So let's kind of talk a little bit more about that. Why is this conversation around friendship and self-esteem why is it coming up in this presentation today? Why does it mean so much? When we take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, right, we see those physiological needs. You all are doing that: air, water, food, shelter. You're making sure you're ensuring their safety, right? But right at the top, what's right next to each other? You see love and belonging underneath that: friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. And right above that, that esteem, respect, self-esteem, status, and so forth. What we know is to live a healthy life, right? To live a life that kind of reaches this self-actualization, love and belongingness and self-esteem are really close to one another. And that's why it's critical that we talk about them not only separately, but then also how they interact together. as parents, right, when we talk about social interaction and friendship, just like I think about my friendships growing up, I'm sure many of you are thinking about your own friendships. How did you meet, right? You met on the playground, or you connected with them at work, or, right, you're kind of having your own experiences of what friendship means. And when you're supporting a kiddo in 2025 to connect with a friend, what's really important as a parent is to learn their culture, their language, and what social interaction means to them. I kind of always say, long are the days that we say, I walked up the hill both ways, no shoes in the snow, right? As much as that is helpful, and I'm from Jersey, we walked a lot in the snow. As much as I think that sometimes shows the struggle, what it can do is really kind of disconnect us from our child. I don't get why you all do this. I don't understand that language. Why is everybody doing that or this? And then it becomes judgmental, right? And then sometimes our kiddos can feel like they can't come to us and talk to us versus kind of exploring and getting curious. So I really kind of emphasize, how can we get curious? That does not always mean that we have to like it. It does not always mean that it's in line with their expectations at home, right? So if our kiddos are like, well, everybody's on their phone and they all have a phone, doesn't mean you have to change your expectation just because that's what, or the non negotiable that you have at home, just because that's what's happening in their culture. But it is important to understand what is happening culturally. For example, we know that we are online a lot, right? I mean, you all were probably similar to myself, writing in a classroom, and now they have computers. I mean, I remember taking a computer class to learn about a computer. And so, just culturally, that's changing. Also, what's going on in the language? What is learning and understanding their slang terms? What does that mean? Again, we might not want to know, but that way you can understand, is this a friend? Is this not a friend? And so you kind of learned their language. And how are they having social interactions? What does that look like at school? Do they have time to talk to somebody in the hallway? You want to learn about their environment. Are people talking on the phone? Are they FaceTiming? Because when we get to the skills at the end of this presentation and we talk about what you can do to help, when you've established this base, I know my kiddos' culture, I know their language, I know their social interactions, then you can really help make these effective. And when I kind of explain some of that a little bit later, I'll talk to you about how I do it in a therapeutic context. But a lot of the times I have my kiddos or my teens or even my adults say, that's not how I would say it, right? And you're like, okay, great. How would you say it, right? And that's where that curiosity comes in of like, okay, what works for you? I put these guys up here because I think we all have a mindset of what friendship looks for us. So depending on if it was Bert and Ernie right early on, that's what friendship, or if you were kind of in the Clueless connection, we all kind of have these ideas of what we think friendship looks like within our own kind of our generation and within our surroundings. And what I want you to kind of think about as we're talking about this is, what about your own culture, language, social interactions might be different than your child's even current experience? And maybe if you're open to sharing, like, where do you notice it kind of butts up so that we can kind of talk about that as we, um, kind of get more into the skill building. For example, I think about phones that, I mean, they're constantly wanting a phone, on a phone, playing games. Sometimes they're playing games to connect socially, right? And you're like, is that a social interaction? But they're playing video games. So, yeah, I'd love to know if anyone's feeling like, yes, I'm feeling stuck, or just kind of noticing difference about your child's current experiences that might be different than your own. Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat, whatever makes you more comfortable.
So I've got a 12-year-old that I think where I'm struggling is where I had a similar experience to you, where I could meet kids at school, I could become friends and like the what I would consider the more like traditional natural route,
Mm-hmm.
where he struggles with those connections. But the one friend that he seems to still hang on to, they met at sleepaway camp. So like their whole friendship has had to be based around FaceTime and kind of fostering that relationship. Otherwise, they
Yep.
never would continue that friendship, if that makes sense.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. I find that a lot, that the camp connections, especially because I'm a camp kid. So I feel like camp self is best self, right? So they just have they feel so much freedom at camp and make these connections. But yeah, it's happening long distance, it's happening virtually, and good on you for allowing it to continue because it sounds like a really special relationship. I see. Um, yeah, most of friendships at school are with online friends. Yes. How do I create a sense of safety with online friends, right? What does that mean? That kind of goes back to getting informed, right, about the online culture. What does Discord mean? What does Snapchat? I think sometimes what we can do is like, I don't even want to learn that because if I learned that, then that's just too much and I just don't like it. But being better informed, maybe these online connections are opening up a world of connection for your child that they might have difficulties interacting in person. That's fantastic. But yes, we can keep them safe, right? There can be monitoring and appropriate. And so, love that you're saying, okay, I'm allowing this to happen, but I do know that there's kind of a sense of safety and becoming informed about those safety measures. How do I put on parental blocks? How do I ensure the chat feature is off on Roblox? Because you know what? That's not really monitored. How do I get them on Discord, but make sure it's only for, their age? I think that's really great to kind of think about and allow. Awesome. Thank you for those who shared. Okay, so let's just talk about just general social development, right? So this kind of just refers to the process in which an individual learns. That's the key, and that's where we're really going to hone in. Learns to interact with others and the ability to create meaningful relationships. Some of our kiddos, whether it be due to a kind of just general neurodivergence, maybe they're a single child at home, so they're not having that social interactions. That learn piece is critical. It's not something that's coming from just learning and observing. We need more support, right? We need kind of more guidance as to what that actually looks like. But social development is not just, hey, I'm talking to a friend and I'm making a friend. There's really a lot of components to this that are quite critical. Not only, that development of relationship, as we're talking about, kind of that what we might sense as the maybe easier or typical kind of in-person interaction is not the only way we're developing relationships. So helping them develop that way, but also emotion identification, right? Helping your kiddo learn when you are talking to somebody and they start to look the other way when you're talking a lot, that might say that we have been talking about a topic for a really long time. And it might be helpful to say, are you still interested in this? Because I can talk about Beyblades for another hour, right? So are you still here with me? And kind of helping them learn those tells because they might be not be picking up on them from everybody else. So we can help foster that emotion identification. Just general exploration of environment, right? Giving with safety and with connection and giving them those skills, right? If you go out and take a bike ride with a friend, helping them say, all right, when do you need to be back? What are things to consider? Letting them kind of explore their environment so they can come back and say, that was really fun, or I didn't like that. And they can kind of learn from the environment around them. Also, emotion regulation is a huge part of social development, right? So I think about as kids start to play games, right? And let's say you have a competitive kiddo. I was a competitive kiddo. So you're playing a game and you get frustrated. Well, what can happen is if you throw the Uno cards back in somebody's face because you haven't worked on kind of regulation, maybe that's from personal experience, right? You throw the Uno cards back in somebody's face, right? That may hinder the development of a relationship. So we can help our kiddos learn how to those regulation skills, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that is important for social development, so you can connect and build friendship. How do I appropriately, right? I can still be upset when I lose. I can still be competitive, but how might I handle and regulate that emotion? Also, just social communication. Social communication is not just the verbal communication. Hey, how are you? Also, the nonverbals, right? I'm sure many of you have noticed, for those that are able to see me, I am notorious for talking with my hands, right? It's just how I communicate. I probably could communicate more with just my hands than even what I'm saying. And, learning those skills, right? You could share with your child if they have difficulties verbally connecting with someone, but they say, I still really want to be friends with Johnny on the playground, but sometimes I'm nervous to talk to them. Okay, well, you know what? You don't have to just talk, right? We can wave. You can put a thumbs up. We can smile. That's also social communication. So we'll talk about modeling that. Social development is also around this adaptive functioning. How can they adapt in situations that are new or nuanced to them, right? So when we were talking about that lunchbox moment with my friend, she was kind of in this new and environment where she had to figure out, how do I adapt? How do I engage in this place that I'm unfamiliar with? And her mom did a lot of kind of prep for that. And we'll talk about some of the ways that you can help your child as well. But just again, when we think social development, it's not just making friends, it's all of these kind of pieces. But then we ask, like, okay, where does self esteem come a part of this, right? We go back to that Maslow's hierarchy of need. We have that friendship and belonging, self esteem. Maybe some of you all are like, yes, I'm telling my child how important social development is, but they're nervous or they feel like they can't do it or they're feeling kind of negatively about themselves. And we know that self esteem, right? It's really just their attitude towards oneself and how they feel like they're evaluating oneself. And that can be really challenging as a parent because we want them to. We're sitting there like, you're the best, you're great, you're doing awesome, but if they're having this self evaluation, right, and it feels as though they're not feeling so positively about themselves, and that can really impact just how they generally feel. But self esteem is more just like how you feel about yourself. It's really kind of these other aspects. So, a big part of what I do in my work working with kiddos is uncovering their values. How do you do that with a 9-year-old? You say, like, what's important to you? What do you like? What in your world do you spend a lot of time doing? And in uncovering their values helps them feel kind of start to build this confidence around, okay, this is important to me, and I might find other people who also find this important. I'm going to go back to Beyblades. Maybe I had some Beyblade interaction this week, but like if Beyblades and playing and engaging, right, is something that's really important to them, you might start to uncover, like, is the value playing with other people? Is that the competition that they value? Is it the connection? And can we use Beyblades, right, to help them find others who might also have that value? There's also learning how to trust, which can be really scary, right? Learning to trust yourself, learning to trust others, especially if there's been negative social interactions before. Helping your child become responsible, right? Giving them tasks and chores and different kind of aspects that they can complete at home to kind of build that self-esteem. And also self-esteem comes from just like this general acceptance, which is probably why a lot of us are here. How do I help my child feel accepted within their social environment and accepted within their self? And you're probably noticing, like, as I'm talking about self-esteem and I'm talking about friendship, I'm almost like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Does self-esteem impact our friendships, or do friendships impact our self-esteem? And there's a lot of literature that kind of goes back and forth, right? So we have some literature that says, okay, well, what came first? Our social relationships are shaping self-esteem, right? So self-esteem will fluctuate with the level of approval from others. You might even hear that at home when maybe your one of your children is having a difficult time at school. Maybe they were feeling really positively about themselves, and then they're coming back and say, oh, well, Mary came up to me and said that she doesn't like my backpack anymore, right? And now they're kind of feeling that, like, I don't like my backpack and I don't do anything right. We start to catastrophize. It gets really big because there's not kind of feeling like that approval from others. The perceived kind of appraisal from others can start to shape self perception, right? If every time you're coming in and people are excited to see you, is that kind of shaping every time you come into the classroom, right? Is that shaping how you feel about self? Also, literature suggests that relationships suggest worth, right? Am I worthy? Am I worthy to be a part of this group? And it's kind of influencing just this quality of self esteem. How positively, what's that true quality? How am I feeling? And then relationship security with primary caregiver is impacting the later relationships. So, that's kind of where you all come in as we talk about these relationships, not just the social relationships with friends, but you are primary attachment first go around, right? So, what is my relationship here? Where can I find stability? Do I find stability within this parental relationship so I can go explore my environment? So I can try to make up with Mary, who's, making fun of my backpack, right? Whatever that may be. So, it is critical to kind of find that security. But then the other literature right here, what came first is saying, like, self-esteem shapes social relationships. So self-esteem affects your perception of those relationships with other people. I'm sure you all can connect with this. How many times are you maybe having not the best day and you're talking to maybe somebody at work or your partner, and then you say something and they say something to you and you're like, oh wow, you don't what, you must not be listening, or you don't like what I have to say, or you're mad at me. And they're like, no, I'm not. But because you're feeling negatively about yourself, you're perceiving the world as being negative towards you as well. So, kind of the other side of the coin here with the literature is saying, well, if you're feeling positively about yourself, then you can access that relationship in a positive way. right? And so if you have this low perceived regard for self, right, you start to feel negative about self, then you start to distance yourself. I'm not good at making friends. I'm not good at connecting with others. So I'm just not going to do it. Right. And sometimes our kiddos kind of falling into that neurodivergence category, just maybe have, I think there can be a misconception that they don't have an interest socially, right? And we know that that's not necessarily true. There can be an interest, but it can be so difficult. So then there's like that avoidance to it. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. So instead, I'm going to do the thing that I feel comfortable in, and I'm going to stay there. Uh, Self-esteem has also been stated, right, that it determines success in forming connections. If I can build that self-esteem, then I can form them. I go back to Layla, my friend, and her mom kind of working together. They're like building this, successful self-esteem together to kind of help her feel more comfortable to be able to then form those connections. But I think what's most important, whether we kind of argue about, not that we're arguing here, but whether we kind of think about what came first, that self-esteem or friendship, what we know is that they play off of each other. And what we can do to kind of help your child find some of these flip-flop lunchbox moments, right? Those moments where they are able to build that connection. Uh, we can kind of help build self-esteem, and we can help build skill building around social development. So both things can happen at once, and then they can start to feel a little bit more confident in doing that. This does not mean that every single time it will result, right, in a lifelong friendship, right? It might just be a friendship for a season, right? It might just be a friendship for a reason, right? They might just kind of learn how to connect and say, okay, well, that didn't go as planned, or I don't know that I like this. And then they get to try again. But with you all being so engaged and willing to support them, we're already on the right step to kind of helping them. And I think I said earlier, right? I work with kiddos oftentimes in the therapeutic setting, helping them navigate kind of just relationship building. And I'd say a good chunk of time, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, is one of my first steps to you all is learn your child's language and style of communication. Because there have been many times that I sit in a session and I will say, okay, what if you say this? And then I'll say, okay, now say it like a middle schooler. Say it like, how you might say it to your friends. Say it like, that feels most comfortable to you. And we really just practice it, because I think sometimes as parents, we're like, okay, this sounds good in the adult brain. Let me go. Yes, go out and say, hey, Johnny, do you want to be my friend? And they're like, I'm not going to do that. That's not how you make a friend. And so if you kind of learn about the way that they're communicating and their style of communication, right? So I think a parent had indicated utilizing online friendships, right? If that's their style of communication and that's how they're feeling a little bit more comfortable, you might say, okay, well, what if you send a text to Johnny first to see if you can kind of warm up and you feel a little bit more comfortable? And then tomorrow in school, maybe you connect with him. Or tomorrow you set up a FaceTime because you went to camp together, right? Or something like that. Or tomorrow you set up a plan to play video games. But first, learning how their language and how they communicate can help you foster next steps rather than coming up and just saying what we think, right? Then we know that there's a potential that this will actually be implemented, right? That we actually could have this skill actually completed. The other part, and I know sometimes I feel like this puts a lot of pressure on parents, but you are the model of emotion identification and regulation first, right? So they are watching, as you know, they're sponges. And so they are watching you, even in middle school and high school, if they've decided and told you, I'm no longer watching you, they still are. And they're modeling, one thing that you can do is start to help model that emotion identification and regulation for them. Okay, what does that mean? How do you do it? Right? So first and foremost is helping, especially if you have a kiddo who has some challenges in kind of understanding emotion. Maybe they really understand the extremes, right? So they know happy and they know mad, which is what most adults know. They know happy and mad. But how do we help them like figure out the nuance, right? What is sarcasm as it starts to come up? What is bored? What does that look like, right? What does content look like? So first, just kind of modeling that to them in a way that says like, oh, if you're watching a TV show together, like, oh, Devin looks really bored on TV, doesn't he? Right? You can kind of start pointing those out and identifying that to them in a way that feels, like feels kind of comfortable within your household. If you're watching a movie together, you can point it out on the screen. If you're out and about, Sometimes you could even say like, this is my relaxed face, right? So sometimes kiddos will come up and be like, what are you doing? You're like, this is my relaxed face, so that they can kind of learn that. But then you're also modeling the regulation piece, right? So oftentimes when our kiddos become dysregulated emotionally, and they don't know the skills, right? They don't know what to do. That's where it can sometimes be hard within their social development. And we often, when they become dysregulated, that's when we show up and say, okay, calm down, take a deep breath, right? And many of them are like, I'm so dysregulated, I don't want to learn a new skill right now. I'm not hearing anything, right? I always describe this to parents as, imagine I'm a Jersey driver. So I'll put that out there. I'm driving along as a Jersey driver, and, tense about the traffic and trying to navigate, and somebody tries to teach me a new skill while I'm driving. I will hear none of it, right? However, if I learn this skill maybe outside of driving or outside of doing something that really is heightened, then I can really learn how to regulate. And so the way that you can support your kiddos in doing that is, after a long day, you might be in the car and say, "Ooh, like, Mom had a long day today. I'm feeling kind of stressed. I'm going to play my favorite song. Can we listen to my favorite song?" That's one way to help me, feel like calm down. Or, whew, I'm noticing that I'm feeling a little bit anxious about meeting this new person. I'm going to go on a walk before I do that, right? So we can kind of model and talk about what you all are doing for regulation, and then also practice with them, with your child, around what would make sense for them. Do they have a favorite song? Do they have a cozy corner that they like to sit, or a stuffy, or a weighted blanket? Practicing that outside of the dysregulation will allow them to feel more regulated. Because what will happen over time is, when they're in that social interaction with a friend where they become dysregulated, the hope is that they say, I just need to walk away. I just need to walk away because I'm noticing that what I'm saying isn't working right now. And again, their language might sound different than that, but we know that they can start to utilize those skills, or to take those deep breaths in that moment, or to utilize whatever kind of skill you've modeled to them, to help them be able to engage a little bit more effectively. I kind of alluded to this already, but I think what's key in all of kind of this social development is practicing during low stakes. Again, oftentimes we say like, okay, go meet a new friend, and that can feel like really high stakes. And if we go back to the lunchbox example, and and remember someone saying like, kudos to Layla's mom, what she did is she practiced with her in low stakes, right? She didn't say go and meet friends and try it out. They practiced at home together, right? So whether it's learning about personal space, maybe you have a kiddo who's not doing so well with personal space, they're getting really close to people, right? Or they're sitting in people's laps. You might say, okay, let's practice at home. When you meet a new person, how might we think, like, what's our distance that we want to think, we're far away from them? And you might say, okay, let's grab your favorite stuffy and let's put them in between us. And that's what we can think of, as the distance between me and a friend when I'm meeting them. So we have to be one Elmo's length away to be able to introduce ourselves, right? Like, it can be really concrete and help them think and practice. Okay, tomorrow when you go and try to talk to Johnny, remember, okay, we want to be an Elmo's length away when we introduce ourselves. And so that can be a great way of like, how do we practice? They're low stakes, we're not kind of stressful, there's not a lot of external stimuli happening, they're not feeling distracted, right? Same thing with, if you have a kiddo that's a little bit older in this kind of middle school and high school, and they're starting to become, a little bit more online, and they're engaging with video games, this is where you could say, okay, if somebody were to message you and to ask you where you go to school, what do we think we want to do, right? How do we think we want to interact? Okay, maybe we could come, and get dad, right? They were asking about, like, where I went to school, and I'm not really sure how to answer that. Okay, so you could go get dad. And you could kind of role play it in a really kind of great way, so that when somebody, because somebody probably will message them that's, that they're not supposed to, be messaging with, that they can feel really confident of how I kind of engage socially. So really, this low stake environment allows for them to access the skill when they're outside of that heightened stress, right? So they access this skill outside of the driving stress or the tense, right? That's what we kind of want to think about when we're helping them practice. This is one that I really love, and I find that I get to do this a lot within the therapeutic context of creating goals. And I think you as parents can do this as well. We do a lot of goal setting academically. We do a really great job of prepping and studying and getting ready for the spelling test. And oftentimes we just assume the social stuff will come. But this is where we can set goals and prep and really start to highlight and get excited when your child is engaging more with friends, or maybe engaging more with kind of this positive self talk. Maybe you have a kiddo who's really negative and they're often kind of thinking negatively, right? And so maybe you can even kind of create some of these goals together to help them kind of build self esteem, build that confidence, and also engage with others socially. So, what do I even mean by that? I had a client recently who were kind of working on feeling lonely and how do we build friendships. And our first goal was meet a new friend, like just get somebody's name, right? So that meet a new friend is a really big goal, but our tinier goal was just learn somebody's name in your classroom, right? That you didn't know before. Because if I said, okay, just go meet somebody and you're feeling lonely, that would feel huge. That would feel so big. Just meet a new friend, right? And so what we did is we got really specific, learned their name. And we both jumped out of the chair in session when they came and said, I have someone's name from class. And we really celebrated this idea of like, okay, you have someone's name now. Great. Okay, now what can we do with that? And so we started role playing. Okay, what would happen if we ask them a question? What question do we want to know? What do we want to ask? And so what you can do is together create those goals and celebrate them just the same that you would when they bring home the math test or the spelling test, right? Or anything academically. Same thing with like creating goals of things that they feel really confident in. We want to leverage that, right? So if you have a child, again, I'm personally currently stuck on this Beyblade, but like if you have a child who really loves Beyblades, right? And that's where they feel confidence. And we already know that they like feel really good about their spins and it's connect, they're really fast at it, which is great. Then how can we build a goal that says, all right, what would it look like to bring your Beyblade skill to recess? Is that something you could do? Could we ask your teacher, right? How do we build this goal? How do we build up to it? Do we kind of first see, does anybody else like Beyblades? Who else is interested? Okay, that could be our first goal. The next is to ask the teacher, right? Like you can kind of build that together and work up to like, okay, I'm going to bring Beyblades to school. Because again, if they're, having difficulties with socially, but we can cut the barrier of what the actual activity is, that'd be great, right? Because now we know they feel confident with the Beyblades and we've created a goal to allow for them to engage using that at school and to build friendships. But as we kind of build these goals, there's a lot that they're going to do independently, right? That we're going to say, all right, you can go out. But also, it's like helping facilitate that social interaction. So if you have a kiddo who's having difficulties socially and they're feeling like, I'm not so sure what to do or how to do it, one thing is really just kind of being an active listener in their life and learning about, which many of you all are doing, right? I'm sure you're listening and learning about so many things. Maybe some things that you're like, I don't know if I wanted to listen and learn about that. But, you're listening and learning at all times is starting to hear. So if you have a kiddo who's saying like, oh, I've been really wanting to go rock climbing, right? And that's something that they've wanted to do or they really like doing it, kind of help facilitating that. Like, oh, you know what? I heard you say Julie's name the other day. And you keep bringing up Julie. I wonder, would Julie like to go rock climbing? I can set that up for 2 weeks. I can help call Julie's mom if you'd like, and I can reach out, right? Really facilitating that social interaction. Once you get that planned, right, we can kind of work backwards. Practice at low stakes. Create goals for that social interaction, and then the social interaction comes, right? So that can be really something that they're looking forward to being able to do. So that really, your support in facilitating those social interactions can help bring all of these other goals together, right? You might get really frustrated when rock climbing because it is a frustrating activity, right? It's hard to do. What can we do when we might get frustrated or embarrassed because we didn't go as high as our friend? Okay, I can take deep breaths. Maybe I can walk away from the wall. Maybe we can make sure we're playing our favorite music, right? Something like that to help them. But again, we can bring all of those skills together when we help facilitate that social interaction. Sometimes you might not be able to be there where you're planning an event per se, whether it's inviting them over or going somewhere. So you can almost, how do you sit with them and imagine the social interaction even at school? So you could say, okay, what does it look like when you're at recess? Where is everything? Kind of builds it out. Okay, the slides over here, the swings are over here. Where are people usually playing? Oh, well, you know what? I noticed they're at the basketball court. Okay, how would we connect? What could we do? Right. So that's kind of even facilitating a social interaction that maybe you can't even plan, but you're helping your child plan that. They're like, well, I always swing on the swings, but nobody's over there. Huh, okay, but you want to meet new friends? Where is everybody? Where are they all hanging out? They're playing basketball. Okay, well, I'm not really good at basketball. All right, well, you don't have to play basketball. What could you do over there at basketball? Maybe just kind of stand over there and talk to some people or bring a different activity. And then, sometimes what happens is they start playing basketball, even though they don't feel as good, right? But they just kind of moved their way over. So helping them kind of visualize their environment and help facilitate that social interaction, even from far away, is a great way to kind of support. And here's the additional piece. And I say this because I think as parents, you all carry a lot, right? Many of you have more than one child. Maybe some of you are having a child who's really great at that social interaction, one who's struggling. Maybe it's kind of flipping, right? Where they were doing really well socially, but now we're in middle school and we've tanked socially, right? And they're feeling like, what is going on? It's also important for you all to find ways to get additional support, not only as parents, right? So sometimes, especially kind of in the neurodivergence community, there's often like parents support groups or parent connection groups that you can meet with and say like, okay, is everybody's kiddo having this problem, or is everybody having this difficulty? What are you doing? How are we navigating the online community? To kind of just learn from other parents can be really helpful. Also, sometimes the social interactions, you're feeling like this is really hard for my kiddo when they're going to school, and I feel like I really want them to have a structured place to be able to practice some of these skills. So joining a social skills group can be really fantastic, where they go meet with other kids who are also practicing. It's also a lower stakes, right? Because it's not the lunchroom. So you practice with them outside. It's low stakes. Everybody's kind of working on their social skills and they're coming together. They're often doing it. I've run several social skills groups, and we do it in a fun way. We don't even know that we're being social, right? We're building things, whether it's Legos because we like Legos, or we're kind of doing arts and crafts, but it allows for this like flexibility and use of skills and they're practicing. And then sometimes it might be meeting with somebody one on one, right? And again, I shared this earlier, but I feel like I have a lot of high schoolers who are coming in right now. Is how do I navigate these changes in friendship, right? These big friendship changes. They've been friends their entire life, right? Entire life, 11 years, their entire life. And now they're 14 and they're no longer friends, right? And they're trying to navigate what that looks like. So sometimes just having a space where they can talk about it a little openly, with somebody that's not a parent, right? That can sometimes be really helpful too. So just kind of putting that out there as like there are other avenues. If it feels like okay, we've tried all of these skills at home, I'm doing this, I don't feel like I'm getting the result, then we can kind of start to find other avenues for that additional support. The other side note that I was just thinking about is additional support can also be just involving them in extracurricular activities that they enjoy, right? So we often think like it has to be therapeutic in nature, right? Okay, they have to go to a therapy social skills group, but I write tons of reports, and a lot of the times I'll write, find a group that they're doing sewing, right? If you have a kiddo who really loves to sew, let's find other kids who are sewing so that they can be around. It might not start socially, but they have to start to build social skills, wave to the teacher, sit next to somebody, have a shared group, right? That's all social development. So sometimes that can fall into the additional support of like finding something extracurricular that they can go and practice these skills outside of the school environment. I want us to spend some time with the amount of time that we have, giving you all the floor to ask questions or to talk through, or for you to say, yeah, I've tried this skill, it's not working. What do I do now? So I just wanted to, thank you for listening as I kind of went through what friendship means, and aiming to help you all find some lunchbox moments for your kiddos. But I want to give some time to questions that you might have, or anything that presented or came up for you during the presentation.
Samantha, I'm gonna jump in before we fully open
sure.
the door, because I do want to stop the recording in case people don't feel comfortable having their questions on the recording. Before I do that, I just want to share, thank you so much. I see your slide is thanking us, but thank you for everything that you shared. Even just as you were talking, I was thinking from my different perspectives. Like I taught high school English prior to being in this role and totally understand the aspect of like, I need to learn their language. Like slang and things like that has changed. And I'd be listening and I'd be like, you sound like you're being really mean to each other. And they're like, oh no, like this is what this means. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like things are different. I think it's one of the first times where I was like, wow, I've gotten old. Like I don't understand what you're saying. So I definitely resonated that. And then personally as a mom with my 5-year-old daughter, even what you were saying about the modeling is kind of the first step. She is would be labeled sensitive to with friendships, with peers, things like that. Very aware of, are they upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Even already at 5 years old. And so as you were listening, I'm like, oh, it was reassuring. I'm like, I kind of do that and didn't even realize it. Like I say things like, do you see my face right now? Do I look like I'm mad at you? Does this look like an angry face? Like, I'm just telling you something you need to do. That doesn't mean that I'm mad at you. And so we talk through that. So it's just interesting hearing it in this context. And I'm really grateful myself. I'm sure you're going to have some comments and questions from parents here in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. But thank you so much.
Thank you.